Stephen Bruner, known to us as Thundercat, is emblematic of the resurgence of jazz as a new force in popular music. Since about 2010, Thundercat, Jacob Collier, Lewis Cole, and many more have been combining elements of funk, hip-hop, and new soul aesthetics to create some pretty out there music, while still gaining quite a large following, maybe even tricking you into liking jazz. In any case, Thundercat has a real solid background in jazz, and one way this really comes through is in his use of harmony. His celestial, psychedelic use of chord progressions that shouldn't work, but still kinda do. We'll be using the chord finder that we explored in our other videos and look at his most famous work, Them Changes. Okay, so figuring out these kinds of progressions is not easy. That's why music theory sites on Reddit are always alight with new questions like, hey, has anybody transcribed a new Thundercat? And this is also made harder by the fact that jazz players can take quite a cavalier attitude about how they interpret their harmony from moment to moment within the song, based on things like how the keyboard player chooses to voice the chords.
Yeah. You know, the fact is that jazz is mistakes. You're playing a song, but you do it wrong.
You're playing it wrong.
You're playing it wrong.
Yeah.
And then it's like everyone goes,
and it's like, oh, great,
jazz,
oh,
of course.
art form,
Yeah.
you played it wrong.
Yeah.
You didn't get the melody right again.
With Them Changes, we have a very bold bass movement, outlined by those arpeggiated bass parts: B, G, A flat, F, and E flat. But over that, the chords seem to be B major 7, E flat major 7 over G, A flat minor 7, F7 sus 4, and this one. You see, they don't go straight left to right on the Pathfinder. What we can say is on the grid there is a focus on the central axis of minor thirds, B, F, and A flat for the more solid root chords. And this central vertical axis, which can sound quite static and claustrophobic by itself, has brief moves out to either side, left to E flat or G, and right to B flat or D flat. It makes a nice symmetrical pattern, and it kind of sounds like we're sort of pushing against a predetermined pattern. Esperanza Spalding predates Thundercat in the making you realize you didn't know you like jazz trick, and she was the youngest ever professor to teach at the esteemed Berklee School of Music. Her most famous work is probably the incredible I Know You Know, and she shows in this song her jazz teaching credential with a classic jazzy minor 251. In its simplest form, it usually goes like this: A half diminished, D7 augmented, G minor 9 to E flat 7, which then drops in the bass to D flat 7. The first three chords flow from left to right, because despite the complexity of the jazz voicings, the chords themselves are actually pretty straightforward. The G minor 9 carries on to the right, but in a diagonal move, to get back to the A half diminished, so we have another tritone link. But remember, with the tritone, we skip a notch on the vertical axis. We can begin to see that there is a whole new world of possibilities on the vertical relations in the grid. Not that we are saying this is how musicians are visualizing it, but now it's in front of you, maybe you can see that it is a helpful way to imagine it. And remember, these four chords can be exchanged with each other or even substituted for each other quite freely, according to some theorists. We get even more psychedelic chord progressions in another Thundercat song, Rabbott Ho. On the Chord Pathfinder, these move from left to right like normal, but there's lots of chromatic downward slides on the way, lots of extended chords, and some lowering motion that take backwards on the grid when the lyrics describe a deflating effect. So we start with a G flat major 7 to an F, a semitone descent. Notice how the G flat is actually a major 7, which has the F pitch in it, so the transition to the F is actually quite smooth, despite the fact that every note in the G flat chord descends by a semitone to reach the F. Thundercat then rises to G minor, which elevates us as he sings about opening up the windows. He then sings close the doors, and we sync back along the grid by moving down successive whole tones to F minor major 7, E flat major 7, and then D flat major 7. From then on, we get back onto the strong line of fifth progression, D flat or C sharp to F sharp to B, and then we slide chromatically downwards again, and then we cycle around to begin the whole progression again from scratch after moving down by a major third. On the repeat, however, we don't end on B flat or on G. We end on a G with a crazy dissonant B flat in the bass. Listen out for it. So you can see how some of these weird chord progressions that people like Thundercat and Spalding make can have actually very unique effects. Much more unique than going C, A minor, F, G, but using very similar principles.
And we think this Chord Pathfinder serves us well when trying to understand how these chord progressions flow. Remember, you can get a good effect when using the diagonals, using major thirds moving forwards or backwards.
Use it to try out some interesting chord progressions with your ear as the ultimate guide.
Moving left to right is strong, which you get a lot in classical styles. But pop songs, they tend to move back and forth a bit more. You should try going backwards on the grid as well, but doing this too much can sound a little bit weird.
Substitutes for the 3 primary chords work well, and you can choose substitutes from the vertical lines. If you just use chords from one vertical line, your piece can sound quite hovering and static, but that can still be a good effect.
Going down by a semitone works well and can sound like it's pulling you down towards a more stable chord, like coming from a dominant or even a tonic.